Madam Clerk, if you would, go ahead and read the agenda item for that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Hold a public hearing for an appeal as filed by Rosa Lydia Chicas Maravilla, property owner, to appeal the Hattiesburg Historic Conservation Commission's decision of denial for requests regarding the request for exterior modifications at 112 East 8th Street. The Hattiesburg Historic Conservation Commission voted to deny the request on April 9th, 2025.
As we're moving forward, let me outline the details for the public hearing. First and foremost, looks like Mr. Russell Archer, on behalf of the administration, will outline the request. The appellants will be able to present their case. They'll have a maximum of 15 minutes to present their case. Any folks wishing to speak against or for the request will be recognized, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to speak on that. The administration will present their recommendation to the Planning Commission, and the appellant then will have a chance to rebut. With that being said, Mr. Archer, please go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, council members. I'm honored to present to you the information pertaining to an appeal of the Historic Conservation Commission for 112 East 8th Street in the North Main Historic District. This is a circa 1910 structure. The owner is Rosa Lydia Chicas Maravilla, and the request is, the original request involved exterior renovations to that property, and a few of those items specifically were related to modifying windows and window openings, modifying the front door dimensions, as well as the siding on that house and some trim details on that house. The Historic Conservation Commission heard this petition on April the 9th, 2025, and you can see. Sorry about that. This is the location map showing that property outlined in blue. It's close to Main Street. This is the subject property. These are the adjacent properties. The work items that were identified originally in October of last year by code enforcement were exterior renovations that had not received a building permit at that point in time, nor had they received a certificate of appropriateness, which are both required in the North Main Historic District. These two images show a before condition from 2015 when we were monitoring the property through code enforcement, and then they also show a more recent image from last fall of the current conditions of the house. And I'll point out some things that to note. In the top right, you see not the original windows, but you do see the original window opening as far as the dimensions go. And those particular openings, as you see in the bottom photo, were altered not just in terms of the window that was put in there, the type of window and configuration, but also the dimensions of that window opening were altered. Similarly, there was a triple window on the east side of the house that again, the opening was original, but the windows that were previously in that opening were not. But that was reconfigured into two separate windows of different dimensions. The top photo in this slide shows a double door at the front entrance of the house on the front porch, which again, these doors, even in the previous condition, were not original to the house. Given the age of the house and the style, it's very, very likely that this house had a central door with side light windows, as well as a transom above, potentially a transom. At any rate, later through the years, most likely that was converted to this double door entrance. The work that was conducted last year converted the dimensions to accept a single leaf door. This shows the siding as of 2015, which was a horizontal lap siding, more than likely something like a Hardy product or potentially Masonite, a more modern version of a lap siding. And the most recent work actually removed that siding and installed a vertical siding panels on that wall, and also added some trim features that weren't there before. And again, if you look at the windows, those dimensions have also been changed from the windows on that wall. This is the original, or the scope of work that was provided to us by a contractor that they hired after we became aware of the work being done, to assist them in getting the proper review and permits in place. And this just gives some specifics in terms of the work that was done before we had an opportunity to review it. This is some information pulled directly from the Hattiesburg Historic Design Guidelines Manual that pertains to exterior finishes and trim. And you'll notice a couple of areas that I've circled that reference things like the siding being an important architectural feature of the house, specifically horizontal wood lap siding, and also the not recommended section of this slide talks about covering over original siding, which was previously done at that house, but also that condition remains today, as well as altering the type of siding on the house. Similarly, our design guidelines talk about maintaining the integrity of, at the very least, the window openings in terms of the dimension, the locations, but it also talks about maintaining the appropriate type of window and the configuration of windows that are in those openings, as well as the doors. The original entrances, especially on the primary facade, are very, very important in terms of the architectural integrity of the house. And so our guidelines recommend against altering original door and window openings for that very reason. Shortly after this, we became aware of the work that had been done at this site. We were able to make contact with the owner, and they sent a family representative to meet myself on site, and we did a walk around the house and discuss the next steps, which of course would include getting this information in front of our historic commission and eventually applying for building permits. Communication was very spotty for a long time, but we did finally receive a COA application from them on March the 21st of this year. And it did include all the work that had been completed up to that point. At that time, we placed the request for those exterior renovations on our Historic Conservation Commission agenda for April the 9th. The commissioners heard the request, they reviewed the information, and they voted unanimously at that meeting to deny the request for the exterior renovations based upon the fact that the proposed work was inconsistent with several sections of our design guidelines. I'll be happy to answer any questions or provide clarification.
Council, any questions? If the appellant would like to come up and present your case, you'll have 15 minutes. Is there anyone here for the appellant? Is there anyone here willing to speak for or against this item? Does the administration have anything further? Council, anything? Declare the public hearing is closed. All right, now we'll move forward with our work session for this Monday, May 19th. Madam Clerk, you ready? I did. Agenda review, thank you.
Hello?
Hi, Jeffrey.
Yes, go ahead.
We have you on speakerphone for the meeting.
Thank you, Robin.
All right.
Councilman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Ms. Kenny, whenever you're ready.
consider approve the minutes for the May 5th, 6th, and 9th, 2025 meetings of the City Council.
Any discussion on item number 1? Move to item number 2, which we've already read, so we'll skip over that one. That's for our public hearing. Moving to item number 3.
Accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission to adopt an ordinance that includes amendments to the Land Development Code, Ordinance 3209 as amended, to support the implementation of the Write Down Broadway Master Plan requested by the City of Hattiesburg. These amendments include adding a new overlay district, new definitions, and some minor use changes.
Madam Clerk, would you go ahead and read item number 4 as well?
Yes, sir. Accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission to adopt an ordinance that includes amendments to the official zoning map along Broadway Drive and West Pine corridors to support the implementation of Write Down Broadway Master Plan requested by City of Hattiesburg. Amendments include rezoning of multiple parcels and placing the mentioned parcels in the Broadway Corridor Overlay District.
Hello, Mr. Sykes, go right ahead.
Thank you, Council and Rhonda. So this is the catalyst project for the Write Down Broadway zoning implementation and the master plan that we reviewed and looked at back in January and adopted. And I know that we've made a couple work session presentations to you on the zoning amendments and the map changes. And the items that we've previously reviewed is largely the same. We just made a couple of minor changes since then, but we'll go through the overall amendments and zoning map that we're looking at adopting that was recommended for approval by our Hattiesburg plan. So again, as a brief follow-up, we adopted that master plan in January for our Write Down Broadway plan, and we are looking at trying to accomplish a couple of those implementation tasks that were outlined in that plan. And it was very detailed implementation items that we should be looking at. So we're looking at the first 3 items in this implementation plan, and that's what we're addressing with these text amendments and the zoning changes. So these are the catalyst projects that are set up to really set the stage for the next steps of this this master plan and hopefully moving this corridor district forward. So the first thing that we're looking at is rezoning most of the properties within this overlay area. There's a collection of different zoning along this corridor and ranges from R1, there's a couple of single family residential, but it's largely B5, our regional business zoning, which is very one of the higher business zoning classifications. And so we are looking at consolidating some of the area into the B3 zoning district and leaving some of the B5 and some of the more heavier industrial type use areas and adding an overlay district. And so I know we previously talked about what that is and how that's implemented. And so we'll make some zoning changes with this ordinance, and then the text amendment will create that overlay district, which will create a new set of standards and rules that will apply specifically to this area, and it will keep all of the existing zoning regulations in place that are there for the B3 and B5 zoning, but it will add a couple extra additional items that will increase the standards of design, certain uses that can be done there, and if there's any conflict, the overlay district would take precedence. I do want to point out a couple changes that we've made since our first presentation to you all on a couple of the areas that we changed. So we did grab a couple additional parcels within the boundary of the overlay district. So we did extend this over to the north side of Barter Street to help make that consistent with its transition back into the single family residential area. And then a small section over at the intersection of Adeline and Emerald, where the extension of that just kind of made sense, given that any future redevelopment or any other development into that area may create zoning buffer issues, and it doesn't prohibit the current uses that are already there. And so just kind of make a more streamlined area that kind of follows some more just better boundaries that make more sense. We also added a portion of we did add one more property on the South 17th, heading north again back to a transition area to our single family residential neighborhood. And so again, that adds just that additional layer of protection and helps make that transition transition, a little bit better. And then a couple properties we brought into the overlay district that are adjacent to the Cloverleaf Mall area, just to help maintain a bit of consistency with some of those boundaries, so it's less confusing overall where and what those boundaries would be for our overlay district.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Wait, just, can you go back to the previous slide? The extension where the arrow is, the longest, arm of the arrow, that's just one property, is that on a block?
So it is, it's a commercial property currently, and it's currently zoned B5, and so it was down zoning to make it kind of a little bit more, it adds additional protection as it transitions back into that single family neighborhood residential area. And
Okay, so it's the only one in that little gray looking section that's zoned that way?
No, ma'am, so this area, so I wanna go back to this slide, so the area in yellow, in that same area, all that's zoned to B5 right now. And so as a way to kind of add a little better transition to the neighborhood, down zoning it while keeping the overlay district on it was what we saw as the best, route for this section.
Okay.
Okay, and so we've also, with the overlay district, we're also adding a couple new uses and additional regulations into that. And one of the things that we are doing is adding an artisan production into the overlay district and allowing mixed use as well as multifamily in the entire corridor overlay. And then additional uses in the B3 zoning district that are primarily single family and the two-family duplex uses. So these are all some additional uses that are being added into the area, whether the Broadway corridor overlay or specifically to the B3. And after our first presentation, we did talk about what type of check down we might want to have on multifamily, and we just kind of use a conditional use for anything that would be exceeding a 17 units per acre. So if you have more than that in either mixed use or multifamily, it would require conditional use approval for the city to determine if it's an appropriate use at that location. There's currently no limit on those uses for a B3 or B5, and so having that, which is consistent with our R3, it seemed to make sense for this area. I did want to talk about our artisan production use. There were some questions at our last public hearing on May 7th about what artisan production use is and how it may impact neighboring property owners. But we did add a definition to this as well, and it was in the first presentation that we provided to you. But just for clarity, I do want to talk about it. It is a small-scale on-site production using very light tools and equipment used to foster creative mixed-use district, and it has to be located in an existing structure, and it cannot be in a space larger than 15,000 square feet. And the idea of that is to make sure we're creating some type of parameters around what would be there and what would not be there. And we also want to make sure that there's can include retail, seating, and educational uses. And this kind of plays into that retail-oriented corridor idea while adding some type of artistic production into it. And so some examples of that would be such as a small batch coffee roastery, some type of soap candle maker, pottery or ceramic studios, leather goods studios, and it would not include things like light manufacturing or assembly plants, large warehousing distribution centers. We have a different definition for that, and construction material yards. Those would not qualify for this type of use. And another item that may have been a concern with the cannabis cultivation processing. Well, there may be some areas that treat that as artisan production. We have different definition for that and where it would be allowed, which would be industrial zones. So just want to make sure that was clear with everyone. So with the Broadway corridor overlay, following uses would require conditional use approval within it, and so all of our automotive type uses that were once heavily oriented towards this corridor, it's kind of shifted a little bit, and we want to make sure that as this corridor redevelops, we're looking at the right use uses that happen here, and so having, additional review and approval for those through a conditional use approval for any of those auto-oriented businesses, restaurants with drive-throughs, automotive rental and sales, truck engine maintenance and repair, and, fueling stations and parking lots. We are shifting, trying to shift some of the dimensional standards as well, and the idea behind that, again, is to push things closer to the street to make a more pedestrian-oriented development, and, hopefully create a more walkable and engaging environment. And so a lot of our dimensional standards that we're changing are, kind of revolved around that, pushing things closer to the street. With a couple additional clauses that, add some protection to neighboring single-family residential properties in the area. So we did add a step back clause, which is something that puts a cap on heights of buildings that are directly adjacent to it within a certain buffer area. That is, you cannot go higher than a certain, height of the adjacent zoning districts that the allowance of, sorry, let me rephrase that. You can't go higher than what the adjacent zoning districts allow for if you're within a certain buffer distance. So that helps protect, there's a variety of reasons for that, but it really, the idea is to help keep towering buildings from looking down upon single-family residential structures. And a little bit of infill flexibility to help match the existing pattern of development. So it's just something that gives us staff to help provide some flexibility when there's tremendous conflict and setbacks, when the code calls for something much closer and there's adjacent properties that are much farther back. We have added some additional design requirements in the overlay district, and so, again, these are oriented towards making sure that we do get a more pedestrian-oriented environment here, and those are increasing some of the standards of design for building facades, make sure buildings are oriented towards the streets in which they face, window transparency requirement to keep a better retail type environment so that it's more engaging. Requiring conditional uses for outdoor storage areas. Don't have visual impact on this area that may detract from the overall goal of the master plan. And to match the parking requirements of the B4 downtown area for new construction. The idea there is that there's quite a lot of parking and impervious surface already there, and we don't want to burden development in this area if there's additional parking, if they can find some adjacent parking nearby, either through a parking agreement or if there's any public parking available. And then pole signs to require conditional use approval only in the B3 zone. And with these amendments, we are also bringing in a couple other overall changes to our land development code, which would also impact our overlay district and this area, and that is to allow our mixed-use buildings in the B3 zoning district, which currently are a conditional use requirement, and to also allow microbreweries in that B3 zoning district. And part of that is because of the change in state law that kind of shifted how they're defined and how they operate. They put limitations on the amount of production that they can do that kind of makes them function more like a brew pub instead of a large production facility. And then changing the setback requirements for the B3 zoning district as well, and that would change the setback requirements. Instead of a minimum of 30 with no maximum, we would then set the maximum to 30 feet with a minimum of 0. And again, that is something that the city has had to address through variances in a lot of recent development, because a lot of our B3 zoning districts are on developed corridors where a lot of these buildings are within or close to that 30-foot front setback. Instead of looking at facilitating variances for all the developments that want to meet that pattern of development, we'll just flip it and kind of make a common, we see this as just kind of common sense change in setback standards. And then a few other infill flexibility clauses for any infill development, not just dwellings, in case there is any type of drastic conflict in setbacks and adjacent properties, so that if there is something that needs to be addressed and like would be developed in an infill scenario, redevelopment within an existing corridor, we wouldn't have to go through a variance for something that essentially just makes sense to develop. And then additional side setback waivers for our townhome and townhouses. There's a current conflict in the code, we're just correcting that so that we can allow townhomes or townhouses in our code and within this overlay district. So these are just additional definitions that we are adding back into the code as well to kind of support all these other uses that are going into the overlay district, and some clarification on what we expect with townhomes and townhome designs, and the conditional use requirement for those that have a front-loaded garage. And that sums up the text amendments and the zoning changes, and we've got a couple other things that we're looking at with this master plan. So we are planning for another Night Off Broadway programming event, so similar to what we did last year for kind of a kickoff event. We're looking at doing another one on August 29th, which is tentatively scheduled. And so a lot of questions have also come around, like what are the tax incentives and economic incentives available for this? And so we have, as a city, discussed potential tax increment financing for this area and creating a boundary for it, as well as a potential central business district designation. So both of those are outlined in our Right Down Broadway master plan. However, we've not been able to establish that yet, as we want to get our zoning and overlay district standards in place first before moving forward with those. And then also looking at some of the 16th section land campaign. The laws will be changing on July 1st, that can potentially change how leases are reviewed in specifically this area, and so there's an opportunity for developers to take advantage of some new laws pertaining to that may be attractive to redevelopment on this corridor. And then we are also addressing some abandoned signage along that corridor as part of our master plan as we move forward. And with that, are there any questions from council?
Council, any questions? Let me just state, I don't have a question, but a huge thank you to all of urban development, but specifically to the planning division for the work that you put in on this. This is the word that Representative Missy McGee used when describing the overpasses was transformational. That's what I think this is going to be for this area. The increased traffic, but with the way that you guys have gone through and thought about all the things that needed to be included, you listened to the public, you went out and engaged the public. This is the way it's supposed to happen. So thank you to all of you guys that have been a part of this. It's fantastic. Bright future, and I'm gonna have some kind of framework to build that future around, and you're giving us that, so thanks.
Yes, and thank you to council, administration, and everyone that's been involved in this project so far, and in full support of what we're doing here. So thank you to everyone else as well. I do want to make one note. We do have two ordinances that we're looking at here. One for the land development code changes and the overlay district, and one for the zoning changes. After we had some discussion with Randy, and we have an ordinance that lists the PPINs for all the properties in there, and so talked about it, and it may be in our best interest to just remove that list of PPINs and just use solely the map as the identifier. It could be conflicted with when you start looking at those PPINs, and especially if they change over time. We just want to solely use the map as a reference for the zoning changes.
Well, kudos to whoever looked at all those hundreds of pins. I saw them on the proposed ordinance. That was, somebody put a lot of work in, but I hear what you're saying. I think it's probably a good idea. We'll follow the council's suggestion. All right, Madam Clerk, move on forward to item number 5, please.
Accept the Planning Commission's recommendation to approve a conditional use request for group homes for an R1A zone property made by Jeanette Powell Hoover, property owner applicant, and Benny Powell, representative, property located at 105 North 19th Avenue, PPIN 16061, Forest County, Ward 4.
Right.
Have at it.
Good afternoon, how are y'all? Alright, so this is at 105 North 19th Avenue, it's a conditional request, conditional use request for a group home. It's zoned R1A, it's located just north of Hardy Street. This is just a brief zoning map showing its location. It's in a little bit of a sea of other R1A zone properties, but also business corridor zone properties along the way. In the neighborhood business district, in the future land use map outlined by the plan, and then just a plain aerial view all of where this property is at. Some surrounding pictures of the neighborhood, and you can kind of see, Corner Market there, Hardy Street, looking north. And the planning commission recommended approval for this on May 7th. Any questions?
Kathleen, questions on this item?
Mr. Powell's here if y'all have any questions as well. The applicant.
No questions at this time? Move forward to item number 6.
Alright, so this is another conditional use request this time. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Accept the planning commission's recommendation to approve a conditional use request for places of assembly not otherwise listed for an R3 zone property made by True Light Missionary Baptist Church property owners, Archie Morris, applicant, and Jeff Pittman, engineer, for property located at 500 Hutchinson Avenue, PPIN 26620 and 26616, Forest County, Ward 4.
I wanna steal the shows, all these planning things, keep y'all going. Alright, so this is 500 Hutchinson Avenue, it's another conditional use request, this time it is for a place of assembly not otherwise listed as a church. They have previously applied for a site plan that got approved back in 2017, but our site plans have an expiration of about a year. So they're having to come through the process again since they are ready to move forward with the site. It's an R3 zone property. It's located right across from Hattiesburg High School, right by the baseball field. Here's a zoning map. It's a R3 property for the main part of the church, and then a small little section of B2 zone property. It's in the neighborhood business corridor on the future land use map outlined by the comprehensive plan. And then here's just a more clear, plain look at the aerials right across from the high school. Just some surrounding area images, and then here is their proposed site plan for the church. It has the parking listed out, the trees, green space, all of that. And then planning commission recommended approval for this on May 7th. Questions? And I think we have, our representatives.
Do you have any questions on this item? If not, we'll move forward. Item number 7.
Accept the planning commission's recommendation to approve a conditional use request for parking lot for an MX3 zone property made by Forest General Hospital, property owner applicant Charlie Williamson, representative Levi Weeks, applicant engineer, for property located at 2701 Camp Street, PPIN 16526 and 16525, Forest County, Ward 4.
We're gonna play musical chairs with you today. So this is a conditional use request for a parking lot in the Midtown area, at the 2701 Camp Street location, being requested by Forest General, and they are currently looking at expansion of their cancer center, and they're moving forward and taking out some of the parking in the parking lot there, and we've kind of gone through some site plan review process for that, and they're meeting all the codes for that. However, they are looking at establishing a parking lot in an adjacent property to add some additional surface level parking for the Forest General campus. So here's the location of the property. It is right past the intersection of the Camp and 49 redesign that just was completed. So you're coming from 49 at the intersection to the first property on the corner there. And it's on MX3, which is our mixed use 3-story zoning designation. It is within our neighborhood business district of our future land use map. And then this is an aerial of the property and where they're proposing to develop this parking lot. A couple photos of the surrounding area. And they have submitted a site plan. I'm gonna go to this one because this is the updated site plan that they've submitted, showing some additional landscaping around the entire parking lot. And I think this is fairly close to being approvable, but there's a couple minor tweaks that I think we need to look at. But they have done a good job of meeting the letter of the code for the most part with the design and development with the screening and shrubbery around the parking lot. And I do want to point out that the Midtown concept plan, it calls for us to build out some of these areas a little bit more than, what the city has done in the past, or has allowed. And so there is a bit of a conflict in the code and the master plan and how it calls for some of these, us to be cautious about approving some of these parking lots within the Midtown form-based code area. And it gives a lot of good reasoning behind that, but, just wanna make sure that, you know, as we move forward with this with the form-based code districts, you know, we may need to have additional conversations with the partners within those districts to kind of look at what are we doing with this code, and if we need to make some changes in it, and what are those changes, as almost every development that has come through this corridor has required some type of variance or conditional use or public hearing in order to be developed. And so just something to note that the form-based code master plan does caution against these and kind of calls them out as a problem within the area, but it does note that parking is needed, just we need to be cautious about how we allow them and allow them to be developed. And planning commission did recommend approval for this parking lot, and I'm not sure if it was included in the online items, but there were 2 letters of opposition that were submitted, and I'm gonna provide some copies of that to you all as well, for your review. That's all I have for this. If you have any questions.
Guys, I'll let you scan that, see if you have any questions.
So, what was the discussion around this opposition? It's interesting to me because they were where you stand.
They were, and I think you'll find it common in most planning theory and ideas that we should be cautious about allowing surface level parking lots anywhere within a city, particularly because they don't add a lot of direct economic value to a city. And so there's a lot of justification for being cautious with these as the city moves forward. And so I think you know, anyone that's, you know, calls himself a planner would probably have a similar stance on that.
Very diplomatic answer. You call yourself a planner and you would.
Not have much of an opinion, as he's a city employee, that's what he would.
Well, I have outlined quite a few items in the staff report that kind of outline some concerns that, you know, you may want to think about as you move forward with the decision on this item.
I'll let you know.
Thank you.
There's nothing further on that item. We go ahead, I guess, and combine items 3, 8, and 9. Madam Clerk?
Accept the recommendation of the Board of Adjustment to approve variance request for a 4-foot requirement for fencing to instead allow for a 6-foot fence for a B3 zone property made by Jimmy Odom, property owner, and Scott Martin, applicant, for property located at 700 Louis Street, PPINs 17508, 17509, and 17510, Forest County, Ward 2. And accept the Planning Commission's recommendation to approve a conditional use request for contractor's office for B3 zone property made by Jimmy Odom, property owner, and Scott Martin, applicant, for property located at 700 Louis Street, same PPIN numbers, Ward 2.
Alright, Musical chairs again, hey y'all. So 700 Bowie Street, they're asking for conditional use approval for a contractor's office and for a fence height variance. The conditional use is for a contractor's office. It's a landscaping business. They're wanting to use it as storage at this location, and the closest use in our code is contractor's office. It's located on Bowie Street. It's these three parcels right here on that line of business zone properties. It's situated in the Neighborhood Conservation District, but also the Community Business District A from our future land use map, and it does sit in a flood zone. Here's just a clear aerial of the property. Surrounding areas, this building has been vacant for some time, so this would bring this building back into use. And then here is the proposed site plan, using that building for some storage, and the gold yellow is the outline of where the fence would go for a 6-foot fence.
What kind of fence is it?
I believe it's a black vinyl coated chain link fence. Mr. Martin's here and could answer as well. Yeah. Chain link, black vinyl coated. And Planning Commission recommended approval for the contractor's office conditional use request, and Board of Adjustment also recommended approval for the fence height variance. Any questions?
Anything else, Mr.
I'm happy to see it there. Since it's gonna be used for storage, my concern would be with whatever, is the storage gonna be inside or outside? I know it's a building there. Whether that will be visible and how it would look along the way.
Yeah, Mr. Martin has, told us that the plan is to store mostly everything inside, maybe a
Okay.
truck or two,
Okay.
outside in the parking area, but mostly everything inside.
Okay.
If there's nothing further, going to move to item number 10.
Request for sign variances made by Hattiesburg Clinic property owner, Joey Davion property owner, and Cliff Henserling applicant for multiple variances for 2 signs for the requirement of sign height of 5 feet to instead allow for 8 foot 2 inch, a variance for the requirement of overall sign area of 60 square feet to instead allow for 283.7 square feet, and a variance from the maximum required of height of the placement of the sign of 18 feet to instead allow for 52 feet 4 inches for an EM6 zone property located at 415 South 28th Avenue, PPIN 17824 and 17815, Ward 3. The Board of Adjustment offered no recommendation.
Alright, so we're hopping back over to Midtown and we're jumping into our form-based code district for our plan code for this one. So this is the Hattiesburg Clinic building, the main building on their campus. It's located in this very similarly zoned EM zoning properties with different heights around it. It's located in the neighborhood business corridor and a little bit of the medical district corridor for the future land use plan. Here's just the outline of the main property where these signs are going. Surrounding area, Forest General, largely other Hattiesburg Clinic properties. So the conflict that these signs are meeting in the code is the form-based code sign code calls for sort of smaller signs that are more for pedestrian viewing. So something that's not gonna be too overbearing for, pedestrians walking by. So the proposed signs are actually smaller than the original signs that were there. The logo's been kind of moved a little bit around. I think this next one shows the current square footage of the sign. And they're the same exact sign for each side of the building. But it is coming into conflict with the code for the height of the actual sign itself, the height of the placement of the sign, and then the message area square footage in general. Board of Adjustment actually, in a tie vote, so they sent it to you all with no recommendation. The wrong text right there, but they did send this to y'all with no recommendation, approval or denial. Any questions? I do think the sign contractor's here if y'all have specific questions for them.
Council members?
Just a comment, you know, this clinic is on the outskirts of the Midtown, on the very end of the corner. And you said that, the signage that we were thinking of when we did Midtown was for pedestrian traffic. This really doesn't fall into pedestrian traffic, it's gonna be more people seeing it from, Highway 49, 28th Avenue, stuff like that. They're actually lowering their sign, footage. And I've always had a problem with dealing with a standard sign. And, you know, this is a big building, and having us, you know, follow the code, it would look a little bit stupid, in my opinion.
Anything from anyone else? Thank you very much. We'll move forward to item number 11.
Adopt a resolution declaring property located at PPIN 15625, parcel 2029110041000 as surplus and authorize the sale of said property to Alfred's Estate LLC in the amount of $12,000, and authorize the mayor to execute any and all necessary documents to the same.
Any discussion on item 11? If not, item number 12.
Adopt a resolution setting public hearing on Monday, June 16th, 2025 at 4:00 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at City Hall to determine if certain properties are in such a state of uncleanliness so as to be a menace to the health and safety of the community according to the provision of Mississippi Code 1972, Section 211911.
Any discussion on item 12?
I have one question on it. Was there a notice of violation sent out on this item?
Mr. Quinn? Thank you.
Good evening, Council. No, we did not send a notice of violation specifically on this particular issue.
Isn't that normal procedure though?
In some cases we have, in a number of cases we have, but the state statute does not require us to send out a notice of violation. And given the fact, Councilman, that this property has been in a state of decay and collapse for several years, one of the issues that brought this before was that the status of the one property is pretty much in a state of near collapse. And we wanted to make sure we were in a position to move forward with that and develop some dialogue. Our intention is to.
Hold on 1 second. Please let the speaker speak. Is that outside? Close the door, please, someone. Thank you.
Our intention was to use this as a mechanism to bring the parties involved to the table. Let's talk about a plan going forward. Let's develop a plan of action about how we can resolve these issues. And it really gives us a better position rather than going through a court process, but going through this process in order to allow us to work with them over a consistent and continual basis. Should the council approve this request, the resolution does not expire for 2 years. So that would give us an extended period of time to work with the owners of this property to resolve these issues. And that's our intent, is to get these issues resolved. And we're not looking at taking action in this sense, but this is a legal means of putting us in a position to resolve the issue in the long term.
Thank you.
I have a question with Wiley Quinn. Mr. Quinn, not about this property.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about that first statement you made, that the statute does not require a notice of violation. So I'm concerned about the impact that has on our processes.
Well, the statute itself says that once the council votes, notice of the public hearing is then sent to the owners of record or any parties of interest. That notice will be sent on Wednesday, as soon as the council votes, if the council votes to set the public hearing on this particular issue. The notice of violation that we send is an internal policy.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, and In this case, we have had discussions in the past. As a matter of fact, about 3-4 weeks ago, I had a discussion with a member of this congregation. And I brought it to his attention in that discussion that we were we were coming to the point that we were gonna have to take some action on this property. I have, as recent as last Friday and even today, been in communication with with the pastor of this particular entity and religious entity and discussed the same thing, that we're going to have to come to the table and talk consistently, and that's what we plan to do. Even though, of course, yes, I would have, in a perfect world, yes, it would have been better if I sent the notice, but we decided that we needed to move forward with this at this particular time, especially in view of the condition of one of those properties, because our fear was collapse and causing safety and health issues or health hazards to anyone walking by or driving by.
My concern again is not with this property, it's with the process that we use when we get notice of violations. Cause you know, I get, not for long, no. I ordinarily get calls, and regularly, I got a notice of violation, one after another. I can say that there are weeks that I've got those calls every day, okay? And if you're saying that that's not a necessary process that you have to follow, then I have been aggravated for naught.
Well, this was a decision with regard to this property. I wouldn't say you've been aggravated for naught, because I can say over the last few years that quite a bit has been done in Ward 2 and in several other wards, and I can convey and understand that you, given the number of notices that have been issued, I can see where you would receive phone calls on a pretty consistent basis. But in this particular issue, I did discuss it with code enforcement, and it was my decision that we would request the setting of this hearing and forego that process. So I'll take all the heat for this.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing further on item 12. Now, approach to read item number 13.
Adopt resolutions adjudicating and directing the placement and assessment for cleanup costs and applicable penalties not to exceed the values prescribed by state law against the enclosed property.
Any discussion? Move to item 14.
Approve supplemental agreement number 1 with J. Bearden Inc. for the Arcadia Sunset Water Improvement Project to adjust quantities to actuals and reduce the contract amount by $50,807.25 for a final contract amount of $597,019.25, and authorize the mayor to execute in multiples. Authorize final acceptance and closeout of the project. Payment of the final pay application in the amount of $39,191.33.
Move forward to item number 15.
Approve supplemental agreement number 1 with R&J Construction Inc. for the Country Club Road Reconstruction Project to account for certain changes to pay items resulting in a contract decrease by $6,950.08 and ratify the mayor's signature on said contract.
Anything on 15, council? Now we'll move on to item number 16.
Approve agreement between City of Hattiesburg and Downtown Hattiesburg Association, a designated Mississippi Main Street Association member, to provide operational support for Downtown Hattiesburg Association's partnered events. Authorize manual check and the mayor to execute the same.
Any discussion on this item? Appreciate the work of DHA for sure. Move on to item number 17.
Take from the table, approve the contract for purchase and sale of real property between the Forest County Industrial Park for Commission and MMC Materials Inc. effective April 8, 2025.
Anything on item 17, council? If not, move to item 18.
Acknowledge requests for qualifications received on May 1st, 2025 for financial consulting services for HUD, CDBG, and home programs, and accept the bid from Compliance One Consulting LLC in the amount of $10,036.80 and authorize the mayor to execute the same.
Any discussion? Move to item 19.
Acknowledge receipt of a letter received by the Department of Revenue granting ad valorem tax exemption to Zeon Chemicals LP for a period not to exceed 10 years, commencing December 31st, 2022, with a true value of $868,124.09, and adopt the final order allowing same.
Discussion on 19. Move to item number 20.
Acknowledge receipt of a letter received from the Department of Revenue granting ad valorem tax exemption to Excel Injection Molding Inc. for a period not to exceed 5 years, commencing December 31st, 2022, with a true total value of $243,416, and adopt the final order allowing same.
Anything on item 20? Not, we'll move to the routine agenda. Anything on items number 1 through 8? Okay, we'll move to the claims docket. Councilman George, have anything, any questions on the claims docket?
Not here.
Councilwoman Delgado?
Yeah.
Mr. Carroll? I have none. Councilman Brown?
None.
We move forward now to Citizens Forum. We have one speaker this evening for Citizens Forum. I'll remind everyone that you're gonna have 3 minutes to address the council. There will not be a question and answer session. If there are questions, we can try to answer those for you at a later time. With that being said, our one and only speaker this evening is Ms. Virginia Smith. Good evening.
Virginia Smith, 200 Tuscan Avenue, apartment A, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, 39401. Again, I want to come and I want to say that I appreciate a day late and a penny short for the code enforcement coming out. I appreciate that. But still, I'm suffering from a lung infection again. Hear my voice today. So again, the baby, he's 2 months today. He got out of the hospital because he had a bacterial infection. So again, I appreciate the, let me see how to put that, nonchalant, and because it's not you all that has to deal with it. I appreciate that so much. Now, who's gonna take responsibility for not doing the duty? I don't know that, because I didn't sign up for a job. I don't clock in nobody's job. I pay my taxes. So that means that my tax dollar is supposed to be able to be transparent and be able to hold people accountable for what they're not doing. You all are sitting here. I know y'all get tired of me coming every 2 weeks. I get tired of living this every 2 weeks. I don't like to sleep there. I don't like to even be there, but I have no choice but to be there. I have to subject my grandbabies to this unfair treatment of our great city of Hattiesburg because of this mold issue that I have no, let me see what the word is. I have no interest in the building. I own no part. I keep it clean. But this landlord has a health and safety issue. It's compromising our health and safety. But who is responsible for upholding the code, enforcing the code? So who's gonna take responsibility for that? I heard Mr. Quinn just speak, said he's gonna take responsibility for that one. Well, who's gonna take responsibility for us getting sick? I wanna know that. So if y'all have any questions or concerns, feel out to reach out to me. Address again is 200 Tuscan Avenue, apartment in Ward 5. You know, I feel like that it's turning on deaf ears. But again, I'm gonna come here every 2 weeks until somebody get the job done. Or if I could fire you all, I would do that. But I can't do that because it's a change of commands. So if I could, I would. I have an awesome one.
Anyone else want to speak at Citizens Forum that did not sign up? Not, we're gonna declare that closed. Anything else to come before the council this evening? Not, we'll stand to recess till tomorrow.